Hello, I'm Greg Sanders, Group Publisher at QSR Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, The Millennial Majority, How 50% of the American Workforce Influences QSR Spend. More than half of America's workforce is made up of millennials, and how they decide where they eat, even for work, is greatly impacting the quick service restaurant landscape. In this program, our presenters will discuss such issues as why working millennials are choosing quick service restaurants, what is most important to them when they choose a quick service restaurant for business dining, for travel and catering, and how quick service restaurants can attract the millennial workforce. Our presenters for this program are Kristen Hoffman, Director of Marketing, Restaurant Partnerships at Denova, and Shannon Delaney, Vice President of Marketing at Denova. Kristen and Shannon, I will turn it over to you now.
Well, I'm Kristen with Denova, and we often like to say that we make business meals count. But our day jobs are largely about promoting our network of restaurants to corporate gatekeepers and showcasing our partners as business-grade restaurants for some of the largest names in business.
And I'm Shannon Delaney, and another thing we like to focus on is conducting research so that obviously we can do our jobs a little bit better, but also so we can share interesting findings specific to business dining with our peers in the restaurant space. And I'll explain a little as we go why that's so important. So with that, let's get started. So here we are talking about millennials again. I know everybody's always talking about millennials, and maybe you all get a little bit sick of hearing about it. But we're bringing it to you from a different lens today, and specifically how that impacts your industry. And it's important to point out that even though the picture here on the screen shows a bunch of, hipster kids, the reality is, according to Pew Internet Research, millennials born between 1981 and 1996 are as young as 23, but they're also turning 38 this year. And they are definitely a force to be reckoned with in the business world. And when we talk specifically about business dining as a subset of the entire restaurant industry, we're talking about $100 billion in annual spend in the US alone. And that's largely made up of $77 billion in travel meals. So this is traveling employees of corporations on the road, using their corporate credit card to buy their meals. It's also made up of $15 billion in catering specifically at restaurants from corporations, and another $8 billion in private dining events, whether that's, special small meetings and things like that. So it is a significant amount of spend. And when you also consider the fact, and maybe the most staggering statistic here, is that millennials are going to make up 50% of the US workforce by 2020, and that's just a couple months away. So it is definitely a big part of the workforce. I know this industry employs a large segment of the millennial population, but so do large corporations in the United States. And then when you look at it globally, by 2025, millennials will be 75% of the workforce. So with that in mind, we wanted to really think about how these millennials are spending company money when they're traveling for business. And so in 2018, we partnered with the Global Business Travel Association to conduct a research study of corporate business travelers and their behaviors on the road. And we're going to share some of those findings today. But first, I kind of want to break a misperception. I think it's often perceived that business dining is all white tablecloth. And as you can see here on the screen, all segments are benefiting from business dining. And while Gen X enjoys fine dining maybe more than other generations, as you see with the 35%, or boomers opt a little bit more for upscale casual, as you can see with the 79%, the fastest growing segments in business dining are both quick service and fast casual. And that is largely being driven by millennials. So while fast casual is a big boom for both millennials and Gen X, we definitely see them dominating the QSR space. And we'll talk a good bit about why that is here shortly. But first, Kristen's going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover today on our webinar.
Great. So today you're going to walk away with understanding more about these 4 areas specific to millennial business diners. So why are they choosing quick service restaurant? how they choose the quick service restaurants that they select, what's important to them when making those choices, and lastly, specifically, how you can attract more of them to your restaurant. And first, let's take a look at what is driving their choice of quick service restaurant and fast casual. So for millennials across the board, it's all about portable efficiency. And you see this in the industry overall with the rise of third-party delivery. But again, millennials are the generation that's on the go, and it's definitely evidenced in their behaviors when they're traveling. So essentially, they're hitting the ground running and getting their workday started.
That's right, Kristen. So when you look at some of the data points here on the slide, only 30% of millennials are opting to take advantage of the free hotel breakfast or the restaurant in the hotel versus 63% of boomers and 52% of Gen X. Instead, what they're doing is choosing to either head to the coffee shop, with 20% of millennials choosing that option. And then the other interesting thing here is 18% of both millennials and Gen X are definitely using the power breakfast in the morning as a way to get started. So they're starting business sort of earlier, where boomers actually tend to sort of start at a more leisurely pace, with only 8% of them actually, having breakfast with a client as they're getting their day started.
And then for lunch, millennials are choosing restaurants that support their mealtime goals. So research tells us that's mostly about continuing their work.
Right. So 42% of millennials are grabbing something quick for lunch, and they're choosing to do it solo. So it's kind of, quiet downtime in the middle of their day where they're keeping the workday going. They're choosing to go to places that have Wi-Fi so that they can keep the workday moving. Boomers, 38% of them are actually power lunching with clients and prospects. And Gen X has a tendency to dine with other coworkers. And we like to joke about Gen Xers being sort of the social butterflies of business dining and always kind of with someone else while they're doing it. And what's interesting here too with boomers is many of them are actually choosing to continue working at the lunch site and ordering lunch in for everybody to keep the workday going. And we kind of think that's a little funny if you think about it, with 21% of boomers choosing to order in lunch and keep working, where millennials and Gen X are only at 12%. And then you think about the 42% of millennials that are choosing to go solo. Maybe they just want to get away from their bosses at lunchtime.
Possibly. And finally, by day's end, millennials are really bucking the old dining stereotypes.
Yeah, I think this is the slide, or the data point rather, that we found the most interesting. Millennials and Gen X are definitely dining with their clients when duty calls. So you can see here, 36% of millennials and Gen X are having dinner with a client when they need to. Boomers are definitely leading the way at 52%. But what's really fascinating here is that millennials are 6 times more likely than boomers to go back to their room and either order in something like Uber Eats at their hotel room, or grab something and bring it back to the room alone. And so it's kind of interesting when you juxtapose that to how they get their day started, and they're just jumping right to it. And it's almost like by the end of the day, they've been so efficient and so focused on the workday all day long that when they're done, they just sort of want to check out and chill out and watch some Netflix in their room.
Yeah. So the big takeaway here is that millennials are the business diner you won't see as often as other generations. They are grabbing snacks, they're grabbing quick meals, and they're often dining alone in their hotel. Now let's talk about how they make their decisions.
So not surprising here, mobile is really key for millennials. I don't think that's anything new. When you think about it, this is a generation that has grown up with digital, social media, mobile devices almost from the very beginning. And so mobile is the window to how they look at the world. And companies that are employing them are becoming more aware of this, and they're becoming more flexible with accommodating their behaviors and their mobile tendencies in the workplace. So they're promoting more of these apps, and they're allowing more of these apps on their work devices, and actually incorporating them more into their tools to help kind of drive down friction on the road. So, if you think about what the data is that you see here on the screen, is that millennials are, not surprising, using more Uber Eats. Boomers tend to have more Yelp on their devices. And then look over here to the far right, you can see specifically what millennials are using. Uber Eats tops the list. You've got TripAdvisor, Grubhub, Yelp, Postmates, OpenTable. So you can see, for them, it's typically more about getting a quick bit of information or quick access to food versus that longer, research behavior that some other generations might exhibit, which we'll jump in a little bit more on that in a moment. So there's a lot of information here on the screen. So let me kind of break it down for you. The colored bars represent all business travelers. The black bars specifically are millennials. And what this is it's about what they're doing while they're traveling for business. And what's interesting here is, as you can see, ordering delivery, we've talked about that a good bit, right? So ordering delivery while they're traveling for work, 43% of millennials versus 35% overall. Or sending colleagues information about a restaurant. You can see here, 36% of millennials are doing that versus 30% overall. And they're also doing a lot of social media research. Not surprising, millennials at 36% search for social media information and photos of restaurants versus 33% overall. I think another interesting point here is they're making reservations less than others as well. So you can see here 47% overall are using their mobile devices to make reservations, whereas millennials are only doing that 41% of the time. And we'll share a little bit about that here in just a moment of why we think that is.
All right, so what can you do to capitalize on these mobile tendencies? Well, first, you can make sure your mobile presence is optimized to the types of searching and sharing behaviors that we just discussed. You want to make sure that your site is mobile friendly. And also, do you use the types of search terms for which they're looking? So for example, the best place for a client dinner in downtown Chicago. Secondly, can you encourage business diners to write reviews from their point of view? So for example, the sound level in this restaurant is perfect for a client meeting, or the Wi-Fi is reliable if you need to work during lunch. All right, let's take a look at what really matters to millennials when they're choosing QSR and fast casual.
All right, so what we know about millennials in general is they value experience over everything. I think that's probably also another common theme that this industry talks about quite a bit. They have a tendency to seek out really unique and interesting experiences, and they broadcast them over social media and share them with their network. When they go on a trip, it's all about having that interesting experience that's kind of unique to that city and about where they are in that moment. But I think what's really interesting here, we were most shocked by, is that 70% of millennials are researching the dining options prior to even going on their trip. So before they even get to that city, they're looking up where they're going to eat. I think that's really fascinating. And then that's worth mentioning that that number overall is 63%. So 63% of all travelers do that, but 70% of millennials do. So definitely more often of the time. 78% of millennial business travelers want to eat like a local when they're on the road. So what that means is they want the best Tex-Mex in Austin and the best pizza in Chicago and the best lobster roll in Boston. And they really want to try to find those experiences when they're doing that research. There is a value to the comfort of trusted brands as well. They definitely want to have those trusted brands available to them. 67% of millennials said that this is the case versus 59% of overall travelers, which was kind of surprising to us because I think probably often we hear that maybe they don't attract to the chains as much, but I think that's a really nice finding for the industry. And then if you look over here to the right, what are they researching prior to travel? Specifically, the locations of those tried and true brands, the foods that are unique to the cities that they're visiting, what's popular with locals, and also what's close to their hotel or work. So if you go back to that idea of optimizing their workday, they're definitely very much looking for things that are still within a perimeter of access to the work site. So when we think about a little bit more about what millennials care about, they also aren't ditching their diets on the road. Not surprisingly, they're trying really hard to be healthy. In fact, 80% of the millennials surveyed said this was a key priority for them.
Absolutely. And they're specifically looking to restaurants to help them by offering healthy menu options with published nutritional facts. In fact, 26% say they're looking for vegan or vegetarian options. Keeping in mind that all of the pre-trip research that we recently spoke about, this is a huge opportunity for your restaurant to build mobile experiences that support all of that research.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about what motivates them to do the right thing when they're spending company money. Because again, we've been talking about millennial business travelers, so employees of large corporations. They're on the road, they've got their company credit card, they've got their per diems, and they got their rules and regulations about what they are and aren't allowed to do. So what's motivating them to make the right decisions? Large companies have really big travel spends, like we're talking tens of millions of dollars just for one company oftentimes. And so what they have is they have these preferred vendor programs. So employees are required to fly on specific airlines, stay in specific hotels, and their companies earn rebates from their suppliers as a result of directing that spend into those preferred programs. Denova happens to be a preferred program for the who's who of Fortune 1000. So the companies that direct their spend into Denova partner restaurants are going to see the benefit of those business travelers coming into their restaurants. So as for what motivates the employees to comply, we found that millennials were much more motivated than other generations about their company actually earning a rebate on those transactions. So they want to do the right thing. They want to see their companies, benefit from having those preferred programs. And you can see that Gen X and boomers in particular are just a little bit more self-centered than the millennials when it comes down to earning points for themselves. So oftentimes these preferred programs like Sky Miles and American Advantage Miles, the employee perk there is that they get to keep those points. Employees definitely do like to earn those points. Gen X and baby boomers maybe a little bit more so. Another thing that's interesting here is we know that millennials like to put their money where their hearts are. They choose to do things and interact with brands that align with their personal values. And they're really motivated to dine in our network when they know their points are going to charitable causes. So oftentimes our corporate partners have foundations and their own charitable initiatives. And those employees are earning those points oftentimes to gift them over to their organization to help fuel those charitable activities, which I think is a really kind of a fascinating thing when you look at 75% of millennials would gift their points to charity versus 61 and 42% of Gen X and baby boomer. So I think it's worth kind of just a quick side note about loyalty programs in general, because what we're kind of talking about here is, we know that you all often have your own loyalty programs, and they're a really important topic for this industry. We have a loyalty program too. So Denova actually acts as a ubiquitous program that the employees of these corporations can earn points across any of our restaurant partners in our program, and then still earn the points in your loyalty program. And what we see from our research is that restaurants that really want to stand out should think beyond free food and instead look at other ways to attract millennials to your programs through those types of causes, as they might gravitate towards them more.
Yeah. So your menu should call out healthy choices, accommodate dietary restrictions, and enable pre-trip research. Importantly, you want to highlight what is unique about your restaurant to include famous local dishes, notable awards such as New York Times Best Awarded Taco in Manhattan, or your swanky rooftop deck. Now we're going to discuss what you can do with all of the stuff we've just told you. Mm-hmm. For starters, let's hit some of the high points from what we learned today. Again, millennials may be the business diners you don't see as often. They are choosing more to-go and delivery meals while traveling for business. They're opting for quicker and cheaper food while out in business. And they are grabbing food at all three major day parts. They do seek out Wi-Fi accessible restaurants or coffee shops more than other generations, with 53% of millennials researching restaurants close to their work site prior to trips. And lastly, 43% have used their mobile device to order delivery while on a business trip.
So what you can do with this, we tried to kind of roll everything we've been telling you up into kind of 5 key things. So number 1, how can you optimize your digital and mobile ecosystem to accommodate all of that pre-trip research we talked about? So remember, 70% of millennials are doing all their research before they even leave for the trip. And if all of your marketing activities are focused in your local market, you may not be discovered at the right moment, whereas your competitor might. So think about that. And how can you make sure that the content that you're developing is really able to be consumed on a mobile device? And so with that, it brings me to number 2, which is be extremely visual with all of your content as well. Knowing that millennials are using their mobile devices more, making sure that your content is really well created for that smaller screen and it's highly visual. You know, show off your food, show off your dishes, show off the inside of your restaurant so that when they're doing that research, they like what they see and they'll choose you. The third thing is to highlight what's unique about your restaurant. So as Kristen was saying, you know, call out what you've won awards for. Why do the locals love you? What is the best dish that you have? And make sure that they're looking for that or able to find that information rather when they're seeking out those bespoke local experiences. The fourth thing you can do is definitely call out your healthy dining options. So with 80% of millennials really caring about this, making sure that your menu is optimized for a mobile device that also calls out those healthy options is going to make it really helpful for them to find you and keep your diners from having to jump through hoops to discover what's special or unique about you. If they're going on trips for business, there can be a lot of friction along the way. And the things that you can do to reduce that friction by making the information really easy to find is going to go a long way for you. And then last and certainly not least, and send them to write reviews, but from a business dining point of view. So I know everybody here probably has their own ratings and reviews programs, but if you can get a couple of your diners to kind of bring in some of that business angle, whether it's the sound level, or this is a great place for a team building event, or this is an awesome place to treat your employees when they've done a great job. Those types of things will go a long way to enticing your business diners as well.
Yeah. So how does Denova fit into your strategy? Denova's access to corporate gatekeepers makes your restaurant a preferred business grade option for some of the biggest names in business. While we've talked a lot about travel today, we also provide a platform specifically for corporate catering as well. So when we look at that $8 billion in private dining, as well as the $15 billion in corporate catering, we have services that are created to help you with that as well. Our QSR and fast casual partners specifically enjoy the benefits of our program being operationally invisible, and that Denova gives them access to millions of business diners who ring up much higher check averages.
Great. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions. I believe, Greg, you're going to handle some question moderation for us.
I am indeed. Kristen and Shannon, thank you so much for that great information, a really good presentation. So we're going to take a few questions that have come in from the audience at this point. And first up, for Kristen and Shannon, do millennial diners want an explicit call out of healthy options, or do they prefer more covert messaging?
So as we mentioned earlier, they absolutely want the call outs of healthy options. So if your menu has a call out box that allows you to highlight keto friendly meals or Whole30 or vegetarian and vegan options or little icons that designate that is what they're looking for. We don't want them to jump through hoops to find the healthier options that they're looking for.
Okay, second question. If millennials are more likely to be using third-party delivery apps, is this a good thing for quick service restaurants where they end up giving up a lot of control over the experience?
Well, I'm sure this is a very controversial topic. I think the battle to own customer data is probably one of the most prevalent battles in the industry right now. At the end of the day, I would just say it's happening. The data's there. With millennials 6 times more likely to do it than other generations. And surprisingly to us, they're doing it while they're on their business trips. We have another body of research we just put out this year on the corporate travel side. And what we're seeing is that more companies are actually allowing those third-party vendor fees that are a little bit higher than their average per diems. They're allowing those fees to be expensable on their expense reports. So the reality is millennials have kind of demanded it. The companies are allowing it. It's just sort of a fact of the world right now. And I don't think it's something you can get away from. And so I would argue that if you're not doing it, you're going to probably miss out on a slice of the traffic that you could be getting from those midweek out-of-towners if you're not allowing it.
Have you done any research on best practices when looking to hire millennials?
That's kind of a tricky one. I would imagine that, we hire them all the time here at Denova. I know our corporate partners talk about this a good bit. That's probably a good bit different for the restaurant industry. I would say if you just look at it in terms of just some of the trends we shared today, right? Allowing them to be mobile, allowing them to be social. That's actually how they're finding a lot of information. So I would question whether or not, employers are doing a good job of making content about your organization available. And the things that we kind of see attract them, I said earlier, they put their money where their hearts are. They also like to work for companies that align with their values and their sort of, morals and ethics. So anything that you can do to kind of put that out there about your company and kind of get aligned with their hearts is going to go a long way to attracting them. And then I think once you employ them, you got to keep them engaged, and they kind of need to know, what's in it for them on a regular basis, and how you're aligning to those values, and how you're keeping those values as part of sort of your everyday mission, that you're doing. So I guess I kind of answer it that way. Hopefully that's helpful to somebody.
Okay, next question. Through your research, have you concluded that millennials have the same tendencies when they aren't traveling for business?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think actually what we're seeing is an inverse. We're seeing the consumer behavior actually bringing itself into the corporate world as opposed to the other way around. And this is kind of new, by the way. On the corporate travel side, the big theme of the moment is I'm putting air quotes up here, the consumerization of travel. And what that means is all these consumer sort of travel trends and tools and technology are being expected by millennials when they go to their companies to go to work. They want to be able to use the same apps, the same tools, the same level of mobile productivity, the same types of loyalty programs. They want all that, but they want it in their work. And companies, because they're in a war for talent, just like this industry is as well, have realized that in order to attract and retain their employees, they kind of have to do it. So I think, it's only going to become more so that those consumer behaviors make their way over to the workplace. And that's just probably the question actually we ask ourselves here internally is, are they creating the new trend? And is this just going to be how it is from this point forward? Or as millennials sort of grow and evolve and become the next big group of bosses and managers and companies, are they going to keep changing it, or are we going to revert back to, some old trends? I don't know. It's something that we constantly are watching and monitoring. So I guess stand by for future research from us, because we're always seeking in this space.
All right. Fair enough. I think we have time for one more question. Can you send me a presentation teaser of your company?
Yeah, so what I would recommend is visiting our website, denova.com. And there you're able to see we have an explainer video that briefly gives you kind of a high-level view of the Denova service and platform. And then you're also able to go there to pull additional insights and research.
All right, so that's all the time we have for the program, and I want to thank Denova for making the event possible, and certainly thank Kristen Hoffman and Shannon Delaney for sharing their expertise. And in fact, Shannon and Kristen, I want to give you an opportunity to say a few final words if you'd like.
Absolutely. So, as Kristen mentioned, our website has a lot of great resources. So if you go to denova.com/bite, B-I-T-E, you can download the full report that has a lot of the data, actually all of the data points that we talked about today and more. And so the name of that report is Business Dining, Your Restaurant Silver Lining. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. So we definitely invite you to go and download that. And I guess finally, thanks for listening. We hope you guys found value in this. If you have questions or thoughts or areas that you're more interested in the future and you'd love to see us kind of bring some other business dining insights to the table, don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact us through our website and we'll be happy to respond.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.